Welcome to InConversation, folks. We come to you from Washington, D.C. My name is Ramesh Bhutani.
And I'm Astha Verma.
And today we're going to talk about the election of the Japanese opposition. For the first time in 50 years, they have come in power.
And it's important because we haven't talked that much about Japan recently. It's been all China. So the fact that something is happening in Japan is very interesting.
Yes, and this is very good. By the way, the United States government is very happy with the opposition being elected. And as everybody knows, that the opposition has said very openly they want to rethink the relationship and reliance on United States of America.
It makes sense because, of course, Japan has had a huge economic downturn as bad as the U.S.
Yes.
And so in part that might be
But they have been in there for a very long time.
That's true.
They've been there for 12, 15 years. And yes, that stagnant economic condition has done that revolution in Japanese people. I mean, when you talk about revolt with Japanese, it sounds so strange because they're quiet people.
Right, but that's not unlike India, right? I mean, we had a huge turnover in our government, and the economic conditions forced that turnover in their government.
That's right. But my reason of talking about this is under the global cover, we as Americans now must look at getting out of many of these places that we've been babysitting for years and years and years. For instance, in Okinawa, in Japan, we need to come out. Japanese will be very happy. We must come out of the Korean Peninsula. That dictator over there is crazy. In fact, our presence makes him crazier. I really think the neighborhood can take care of that guy and let the neighborhood take care of it. Same is the case now with Germany. Germany don't need us. You know, we need to get out of Germany, and we need to come out of Afghanistan.
That's your point.
That's we need to come out of Afghanistan because August was the deadliest month for our soldiers. But not only that, the general has openly said, look, either you put in more forces up there or you get out.
So what you're really saying is that President Obama has a political problem on his hands, and that is, if he allocates more troops to Afghanistan, there might be opposition from the American public, which has already extended itself in Iraq.
That'll be his Waterloo.
On the other hand, he can't just do an abrupt pullout from Afghanistan, because that's what the U.S. has done before, which has given rise to terrorists like Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that by pulling out troops globally from all these different places, Afghanistan just becomes another place where we just pull our troops out because it's time for them to come home under the guise of a global withdrawal of troops back to the United States. Is that your contention?
Not only that, if they don't see you up front and close, you don't look ugly that way. You know, up front and close is why America is looking ugly. Let's stay behind. Let's be a mystery for people and see we will gain our respect back.
Perhaps, but there are enough fanatical people out in the world that just don't like the value system that the U.S. is all about. They don't like the freedom aspect. They don't like the equality aspect. They don't like the freedom of religion aspect. They're opposed simply to U.S. values. How are you going to get rid of that? Even if we're not there in their neighborhood, you still have that fundamentalism to combat.
We have created walls. We have created cybersecurity. We have created so many things. Look at Shah Rukh Khan. He was stuck up at the Liberty Airport. And that was pretty bad for everybody in India. Shah Rukh Khan got stopped up. But you know what? Some of the Indians wrote this editorial opinion in some of the Indian newspapers. They say, good, America, we have never had any problem after 9/11. Even Salman Khan in Bombay, I heard him say that on one of the shows in which he said, that's okay. You know, since 9/11, they have never had a problem. So if the security is strong, that's good.
Right, but I think the problem here was that it was the ignorance of the New Jersey officials to not recognize who he was. I'm sure he had paperwork with him.
I beg your pardon, ma'am. Before you go there are other stories about Shah Rukh Khan. Shah Rukh Khan was going to Chicago to see his brother. There were 2 shows that are going to be planned for him. And those people who were doing the show were kind of characters that were a little shady. And that got to the attention of the people there at the airport, and they wanted to hold and talk to him about that. That's the reason Shah Rukh Khan said he does not want to go to America anymore. In other words, he cannot rely on these money people that are going to promote his shows. That was the real reason. Well, it has nothing to do with Shah Rukh Khan alone, you know.
Well, I think the irony of that story is that he's here to promote his movie, My Name is Khan, which is all about racial profiling. So
this was not racial profiling. This was a security threat. This absolutely was. Maybe he was not aware of it, but his brother was or somebody else was. But that's not the point we are going into. We really think as United States of America, it's about time we pull out our forces from around the world and make sure we make training, our fighter planes, our military equipment be available. And of course, we have worked with so many countries to do a joint training sessions. Well, we can do the joint training sessions either at their location or our location. And that business, I like to see it come back without this other thing that we got to give you soldiers.
But you know, this goes back to World War II, where we rescued a lot of nations, and that need for the U.S. to somewhat be a police force around the world to make sure that countries behave or that there's not skirmishes that get out of hand. I don't know that you're going to get rid of that mindset. I think the U.S. feels a certain degree of obligation to do that around the world because of its economic prosperity, and I don't think you're going to just simply accomplish that by giving people military equipment.
You don't need to wait till you're thrown out of those countries. Time to just pull it respectably out of there.
Well, I guess time will tell whether or not your theory about Afghanistan holds true.
Let's move on.
You know, there's a lot of us who've worked for startups that walk around with a lot of these shares. You know, often to try to incentivize new hires, they'll give you stock. For example, 10,000 shares of X or Y. Then, of course, as an employee, you wait for the company to go IPO because that's when you'll make the big bucks.
That's right.
But it happens so infrequently, of course, after the dot-com bust. Startups, 90% of them fail. Only 10% or less actually get to their desired mark of becoming an IPO. So what do you do with all those shares that sit around forever, or for companies that take much longer to get to that IPO stage? Well, a lot of them are now opting for a marketplace that's on Facebook. Using social networking sites, they sell those shares in a privately held auction of sorts, right? So I can trade my shares with your shares. Let's say we determine between us a good price for what those shares are. I can actually offload my 10,000 if I have 10,000 and actually make some money back. Employers, especially those startups, are realizing this